there's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites.
Number 24 is Content Farms in Macedonia.
Бидејќи ако се направи грешка, таа ќе биде кобна. Нема враќање назад.
So Europe need to remain more sexy lady in the world. Ajde, majkata!
Господ ја чува Македонија и низините граѓани.
The Macedonian Orthodox Church is, after nearly 60 years, recognized as independent from the Serbian Orthodox Church and is declared to be in communion with the Orthodox churches from around the world by the patriarch in Constantinople, a minor miracle. And yet, while this should encourage Macedonians, the ever-present Bulgarian children, in the form of the President of Bulgaria and the government of Bulgaria, continue pressing to have their childish demands met. Add to that the most recent, quote, provocation, unquote, the minor fire in front of the Bulgarian club in Bitola, which the Bulgarian government once again predictably condemned as a, quote, hate speech, unquote, and you have yourself one continuing hot mess. Oh, and then there's the continuing inflation. We'll discuss all of this and more on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin in a very hot Skopje, Macedonia.
Ah, but not as hot here. Not as hot here, my friend. No, it's the deserts of Arizona. It's going to be 43 degrees by Saturday. We're recording this on Sunday, June 5, episode 138 of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. So in less than a week, it'll be 43. It hasn't rained here since March 29, so I don't want to hear any complaining or griping from you.
Oh my God. Yeah, okay. Yes, okay. We can compare with the desert.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, it's, well, the monsoons are coming, so there will be relief. The rains and slightly cooler temperatures, but more humidity. But we haven't, so I said today's Sunday, June 5. I don't think we've recorded an episode since early May, so I can't remember if we have a description about the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast, but we might change it to an occasional series of podcasts about all things Macedonian in the English language from a conservative standpoint. So,
when historical things happen in the country.
Exactly. Well, and speaking of historical, yes, let's dive right into it. The Macedonian Orthodox Church is recognized as independent from the Serbian Orthodox Church, in communion with the Orthodox churches from around the world, and that's about all I know. So you are, even though I am, like you, Macedonian Orthodox, you're the resident expert on this, and the month of June, which we are now deep into, or getting deep into, there's a number of dates coming up having to do with the church, with the EU, with Vomero and domestic politics there, the protests they're going to start on the 18th. But the next step in this journey, shall we say, of the Macedonian Orthodox Church is what's the handing over of the Tomos, I believe, to Archbishop Stefan. Why don't you kind of address that and tell our listeners a little bit more about what that means and what's going to happen?
Yeah, I don't know much about the church. I haven't all these intricacies and stuff, but it's a big deal.
Broad
so
picture.
we have Macedonia is obviously, we have Ohrid, which is the seat of Eastern Christianity for the Slavic world. This is where the Bible was translated into the old Church Slavonic language. And since here it was taken, Christianity was carried to Moravia, which is obviously Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia, this region of the world, Poland, and also from Ohrid, missions were sent to, or actually eventually when the Kievan Rus decided on Christianity to follow the Eastern Orthodox religion. Again, the Bibles which were translated, which were copied in Ohrid, were crucial in Christianing practically whole of Russia and all the Eastern Slavic countries, Ukraine, etc. So it's a big deal. So we consider ourselves a very old church, not to mention obviously the Apostle Paul coming to Macedonia. so practically the first European Christian country. But our church, which existed under the Ottoman Empire, where the churches, the religious communities, were like a state within a state. So it was very important to have your own patriarch and your own bishops. They would dispense justice. They would have like foreign office, intelligence office, education would go through the churches for the Christian subjects of the Sultan. So our church was abolished in 1762 by Greek machinations. So obviously the Greek clerics in Constantinople, in Istanbul, influenced the Sultan to abolish our church and demanded that the Ohrid, the churches under the Archbishopry of Ohrid, are given to Greek bishops. So this was practically our loss of independence within the Ottoman Empire. And then as the empire collapsed on its fringes, we are a more central province around Solun. So we were one of the last parts of the empire to be liberated. So the Serbs, the Bulgarians, they established churches before us. And they tried to influence, to gain followers in Macedonia. And eventually when this part of Macedonia was conquered by Serbia, Serbia just declared that our churches fall under the Serbian jurisdiction. This was in 1913, after their conquest of Macedonia. And we declared our independence in Yugoslav times, when Macedonia as a separate republic said, listen, we have very few Serbs here, we cannot be controlled by the Serbian patriarch. The church was suppressed but not abolished under the communist rule, so it was a point of national pride to re-establish it in 1962. Serbia refused to recognize this. They insist that we have to remain under them, and we had a decades-long dispute over the church, which carried on into our independence. Serbian bishops would sometimes, send stern messages saying that all of you there, your prayers, your communion, your, funerals, they're not valid and stuff. You will all go to hell. They would call us raskolnici, like splinter. It's an ugly word for a splinter church, like a sect sometimes. So it was a pretty ugly situation, relatively minor compared to the dispute with Greece and now with Bulgaria, which is far more intrusive, but still an ugly moment in our relations. And all of the sudden, it was a lot of backhanded work going back years, but culminating these past few months, first the ecumenical patriarch, the Bartholomew, the Greek, he's not the Greek church, leader of the Greek church, but claims, says he's first among all equal patriarchs of the Eastern Orthodox world. He was the first one to give us, to declare us no longer in, he declared us, now we're back in canonical unity with the Orthodox churches, so that we are no longer like a splinter church. And this was quickly followed by our Archbishop Stefan going to Belgrade, having a joint mass in the large new cathedral in Belgrade, St. Sava, with the Serbian Patriarch Porphyry, where we practically returned to the Serbian church for a few days, for a week or 10 days. And this was a very, worrying development, because Serbia would often tell us, we do not recognize your separation in 1962. You come back to us, and then we will decide to let you go. We will probably let you go, but first you have to return to us. And this all sounded very suspicious to us. So we did this. We returned to the Serbian church for a period of time. And then on the 24th of May, on the feast of St. Cyril and Methodius, the important saints who practically carried Christianity from Ohrid, from Macedonia to Moravia, to Central Europe. Porphyry came back to Skopje, And in a return visit, in a return sermon, he said, we now accept your independence. So practically he let us go. There are still kinks to be worked out, so we still need to today there was another sermon in Belgrade where the Serbian church gave us the deed of the bill of sale, practically, of our church.
That's the Tomos, right?
Yeah, that's the Tomos, but I think we're still supposed to get one from the ecumenical patriarch, and that's going to be difficult because now they have it's a Greek, and under huge influence of the Greek church, he would not want to have us accepted as the Macedonian Orthodox Church - Archbishopric of Ohrid. He would only accept us as the Archbishopric of Ohrid, so he would not want to have Macedonian in the name. So we'll see. We'll see whether this today is the end of the road, or we'll still have to get something from the ecumenical patriarch as well, before we can say that the church is fully recognized. But and we'll probably have to include pro-Serbian bishops in the church. So there's also what the Serbs said, a technical issue of technical details to be worked out, but it's actually a pretty major moment where they turned one of our bishops against our church. So they declared him, Bishop Jovan of Veles, as the Archbishop of Ohrid. This was done by the Serbian church, and in return we put him in prison, which was a major escalation in our relations with Serbia and dispute between the churches on fraud, money laundering charges, stuff like that. But it was obvious that it was because he practically betrayed our church and went to the Serbian church. So now Serbia still recognizes him as the Archbishop of Ohrid. Now with the Tomos, apparently not anymore, but they will insist. So he's old, he's no longer able to come back, but they will demand that people from his faction of the church, from his separate church practically, are incorporated into our church, or that some of our bishops, because our bishops some are siding with Bulgaria, some are siding with Greece, some are still siding with Serbia. It's a big mess. I mean, they would study in Mount Athos, they would, travel to Moscow, travel to Belgrade, travel to Greece, and they were heavily influenced by regional neighboring intelligence services, and probably Serbia will demand that there is an agreement that while we are independent, they still have some stake, even more than before practically. They did not really have formal power over our church, except in their vain proclamations from time to time, but now they will want something, some kind of role, I'm sure, in the church. But still a big moment. I was in Veles when it happened, and the churches the bells were ringing. It was a big moment when Porphyry declared that he accepts our request for independence in Skopje.
Yeah. As I said, I said in the monologue there, a minor miracle. Maybe it's a major miracle. Three points in listening to you. That was an excellent kind of a summary of the history of the church. But you started with the Apostle Paul, and of course in the book of Acts, which was written by Saint Luke the Evangelist. There's the famous verse, Acts 16:9. During the night, Paul had a vision of a man of Macedonia standing and begging him, Paul, come over to Macedonia and help us, which is a verse I love to quote a lot because it's referred to as quote unquote the Macedonian call, especially among evangelicals, Baptists, Protestants, etc. I of course 26 years ago, I didn't get the Macedonian call. I got the Macedonian email saying come over to Macedonia and help us. And so that's kind of my journey. But I've always found it fascinating, and I've asked people about it, and nobody's ever given me a satisfactory answer, because Luke writes, during the night, Paul had a vision of a man of Macedonia, or a Macedonian man. How did Paul know it was a Macedonian man? Was it the language he was speaking? Was it his dress? Was it some famous Macedonian from before Paul's time. I don't know. It's always been a fun thing to think about. So that's first. Second, I was going back. I just celebrated on May 25, so a day after this the Cyril and Methodius, the celebration of them. On May 25, I celebrate. That's my annual celebration of recognizing when I came to Macedonia, because it was May 25, 1996, after I got the Macedonian email. And so I just celebrated 26 years. I went back and I looked at a thing I wrote 16 years ago, and it was just called Decade. That was the title of the article. You probably translated it, but I don't know what publication it would have run in. But that was 2006, and I reread it, and I noticed, and I was kind of struck by it, because I talked about Archbishop Stefan and the Macedonian Orthodox Church, and I said, pray for Archbishop Stefan. He's got a heavy burden on his shoulders, and so if you read that and you prayed for him, your prayers have now been answered. So I think that's fantastic. And then the third thing I wanted to say in relation to all this is, I was just going back here as we were talking, looking at, we did a film about Macedonia and the name issue in 2009 called A Name is a Name. And in that we talked to a bunch of people throughout Macedonian society, from famous names to people that we just grabbed off the street. And of course, one of the people we talked to was Gospodin Stefan, and we interviewed him there at Sveti Spas. And he made the point, I've got his what he said here in front of me. Maybe we'll figure out how to put it into the podcast. Basically, he said, this is political. That's what the whole thing has been. He says it isn't recognized, meaning the church, not because the Macedonian Orthodox Church has canonic or theological obstacles pertaining to her teachings, since she is identical to the other Orthodox churches, but political issues are the main obstacle for the recognition, which is the acceptance of the Macedonian Orthodox Church. And that's as simple as it is, because that's the way it is. He also goes on to say, and I think this is encouraging, he says, quote, I believe that the Macedonian Orthodox Church, as always, will continue to take part in defending the identity and defending the truth of the Macedonian nation. And I believe that it will endure in defending the name of Macedonia, the name of the Macedonian people, in defense of Macedonia's culture, history, and all that is truly common for the state, for the people, for the church, for the country, for Macedonia. Based on what you said about these events coming up here, we will see how that all works out. It will always be the Macedonian Orthodox Church, just as it will always be Macedonia, the Republic of Macedonia, and the Macedonian people. And our friends who dispute that are just going to have to get used to it.
There's a lot of caveats in all this. I mean, the church, as I said, they did not really support the name. One bishop, Agatangel of Veles, is outspoken in opposing the Prespa Treaty, opposing the pressure from Bulgaria. Another, Bishop Pimen, who covers Europe, is very openly on board with Zaev and all the changes. Bishop Naum of Strumica was very close to Zaev, even they're in business together with the marijuana plantations. The newly appointed bishop of St. John Bigarski Monastery, what was his name? Gosh. He is very openly with the Bulgarian church. So they have not really covered themselves in glory over this period. And the reputation of the church is really down. This was a period of trials when the church was supposed to play some much greater role in everything that was happening. There is a huge caveat over how this recognition happened. We know that Bartholomew, the ecumenical patriarch, he was the one who recognized the Ukrainian church. And this made a huge split in Eastern Orthodoxy between the Constantinople and by far the largest Eastern Orthodox Church, which is obviously Moscow, the Russian Orthodox Church. It was very clear that this recognition was done by pressure, by influence of the U.S. diplomats, U.S. intelligence over Bartholomew. And we have those tapes, if you remember, when Russian pranksters, shall we call them, were recording Zaev.
Right.
And they were pretty sour about Bartholomew, and they knew that Macedonia is in a similar situation. So they say, listen, They were pretending to be Ukrainian President Poroshenko, telling Zaev, listen, we paid Bartholomew, €200,000-300,000, but we can negotiate for you. We have the contact still. We can negotiate with you for you much cheaper price, like €150,000, and he will give you the recognition. And Zaev immediately says, yeah, sure, but he's not surprised. He does not ask, wait, is this how it works? Obviously, this was being discussed with Zaev's American minders.
Mm-hmm.
I would see the American ambassador to Greece, Geoffrey Piat, recently left the country, who was before coming to Greece, he was ambassador to Ukraine during the Maidan.
Yep.
So obviously a point person in these contacts. He was meeting with Bartholomew very frequently in Istanbul. So it's very clear that the US supported this process. There was an attempt shortly after the Prespa Treaty that, we have Bartholomew on board, but Serbs are not eager, not willing to do this. So there was a call by the Macedonian Church to the Bulgarian Church, in which we practically threw ourselves at them and said, we recognize you as our mother church, which is historically all messed up as Serbia claiming seniority over our church, whereas Ohrid is obviously the main center of Christianity here. So the idea was that we do this trick where we join a church and then we are released by its patriarch with recognition from Bartholomew. But if the Serbs are not willing, that we join the Bulgarian church, and then we are separated from their church. So they cut us loose, they give us this recognition, and the Bulgarian church was split. Their synod voted 50-50, they were split in half over this option. They said, we acknowledge your recognition of our seniority, that we are your mother church, and then our request was, okay, can we now have a joint sermon where we are joining you practically, and then you give us the Thomas, and they said, no, we cannot have a joint service. So probably Russia influenced Bulgaria not to go down this path. The day Bartholomew issued his declaration that we are now in canonical unity with the other churches, the pro-SDSM media outlets, the American-funded outlets here, were ready. They immediately had statements. They had some Russian representatives say that they do not recognize Bartholomew's actions, that for Russia, Macedonia is still under Serbian religious church authority, and that this will have to be recognized by Serbia before Russia will accept this, which is natural given their relationship to Bartholomew at the moment. But this was immediately, the reaction here was, look, we have our pro-Western support winning a major recognition for us, but Russia is working against us. So there was a clear attempt by the US diplomats to pit us against Russia and over the church issue. So they would like us to have, like Ukraine, they would like to see us as an anti-Russian, Slavic, Eastern Orthodox country. So we are. So Poland is a valuable ally because it's a Slavic country. It splinters the Slavic world, but they're Catholic. Ukraine obviously is Orthodox, but now with the war, they're separate churches, probably being reinforced in the more Ukrainian parts of the country. Serbia, Bulgaria, they're very weak. They're actually, either a weak Russian ally or a weak Western ally, depending how you look at them. So the diplomats here, the US diplomats are hoping to have us side with the current coalition of willing countries against Russia. And this was supposed to be a sweetener after all the American attacks on Macedonian identity, on Macedonian national sovereignty, etc. They would give us, okay, we give you this recognition of, unfortunately, the role of the church. Sure. The church does not play a role in Macedonia. It does not run schools. It does not run orphanages. It does not, except for ceremonial stuff on major holidays and births and burials. It's really like a cultural institution of some ceremonies which we repeat. So we would get a recognition of a relatively insignificant organization, but with the caveat that we now express our gratitude to our Western allies. And so I guess Serbia was in a pickle here, because it could continue opposing us after the fact that obviously American influence and probably bribes got the Greek ecumenical patriarch on our side. So Serbia could have continued opposing us, in which case this development would have worked to increase tensions between Macedonians and Serbs as well, not only Macedonians and Russia. They practically caved, they gave up, they said, okay, we immediately recognize your independence. And Russia, the same day Russia had the same statement like before. As we said, we recognize whatever Serbia does with regard to the Macedonian Church, we are on board. So now this attempt to pit us against Moscow and Belgrade failed, and practically we won our independence. We'll see to what extent now Serbia will demand influence over the church, and Greece, or the Greek patriarchs of Athens, Alexandria, Antioch, all the ceremonial seats. Albania is practically run by the Greek church as well. How they will refer to us. But this prepared attempt to have Macedonians in feud with Russia, practically becoming part of the split that the U.S. generated between Constantinople and Moscow, the Greek Eastern Orthodoxy and Russia. They wanted to have us become part of this dispute, but it's now been avoided because Serbia acted quickly and Russia followed suit.
Right. Wow. Well, that is quite a explanation there. You mentioned Bulgaria in there a few times, and so we'll pivot to that. But before we do that, let me just add one 30,000 foot, 10,000 meter perspective on this whole thing, and that is what we're talking about here. A lot of, especially when you throw in the interventions of perhaps the State Department and others, is these institutions. The physical institutions of these churches, whereas the church should be the body of believers, whether they're Orthodox, Catholic, Protestant, or even non-denominational. Plenty of people that are believers, because going back to what the jailer in Philippi told the Apostle Paul, what must I do to be saved? Paul said, believe on the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, and you and your family will be saved, that's the gospel there in one sentence. So that's the church. It's the body of believers. But yeah, unfortunately, there's politics in it. There's politics in every church. Not to be discouraged. I mean, look at the Catholic Church and what they've got going on. The Protestant churches have these politics and scandals and things like that as well. Every human created institution is going to have these issues, but the church as a body of believers, an assembly or a congregation, ecclesia, is different. So, but let's switch over here to Bulgaria, as we are obligated to do in each podcast, it seems. So this week, of course, we've got the ongoing debate within the Bulgarian government. President Radev says, no, we're not lifting the veto. Petkov, the prime minister, seems to be a little more moderate, wants to lift the veto. His party, his coalitions are split. They had a big confab, powwow, whatever you want to call it, last Friday, I believe. And I don't think they came to any conclusions. Petkov was just in Washington, D.C., I believe, not with his foreign minister, with somebody else, though, correct?
Yeah, the foreign minister is a hardliner,
right.
So he went there with the deputy foreign minister and the energy defense minister is obviously over Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, they talked, and then of course we have over the weekend, yesterday, the 4th, I believe, the Bulgarian club down in Bitola was A little bit of arson, just no major damage. But predictably, the Bulgarian government's up in arms. Was this, what's the word for when you do it to yourself? I forgot.
Self-immolation.
Yeah, so it's not that, but did the Bulgarians do this, to try and sink all these talks, or was it genuinely some Macedonian who's upset by it? But so we have, let's go back to the dates. June is an important month. We just spent 30 minutes talking about the church. The French end their presidency of the European Council, I believe, at the end of this month, and so they'd like to see some movement on this. There's talk about Macron having already given in to the Bulgarian demands. What's the latest? What do you hear there?
There's a lot of pressure. So now there's supposed to be a visit to France, which holds the rotating presidency of the European Council by Petkov and Radev. Radev was also invited. Pretty unprecedented to have both main leaders of Bulgaria invited by Macron, and Radev refused to go. So he does not, like Gruevski at the time when he knew that he's only being invited to Washington to be pressured on the name. This is a similar situation now. They don't want to go. They don't want to face the pressure. They just want to run out the clock. And we're practically resigned that there won't be agreement. There will be nothing. There won't be a lifting of the veto. Or even if there is, the price will be very high. So the Bulgarian demand is okay. We accept that France is the guarantor of all these demands, which means that we are not pressuring Macedonia, France is. So we're going back to the French veto. So they would outline their demands, give them to the French, and they will insist that any future French government, this government, any future Macedonian government, including this government, they would have to meet the Bulgarian demands, and that it will now be France as guarantor of the list of demands, or the European Union as a whole guaranteeing this. And the demands will obviously be that we acknowledge that we were Bulgarians until 1944, that we spoke Bulgarian until the same year, that all the historic figures were Bulgarian, that the Macedonian language, etc. So, this would mean that the Bulgarian demands are actually becoming much stronger. They are now formally part of the EU accession process. And of course, if the EU countries are not interested in following up this Bulgarian demand, if Bulgaria says, listen, they're not amending their history books fast enough to reflect our version of history. So we cannot let them open the next chapter of EU accession talks. And if all other EU countries say, this is stupid, we are guarantors of this, we signed on to this, but it's ridiculous, Bulgaria will just unilaterally veto us anyway. So, but this demand would actually let us open accession talks, but would actually make their position stronger, because formally the Bulgarian demands will be part of the EU accession conditions for Macedonia. We didn't have this under Greece. To the last day, the Greeks and the the European Union would say, we are not blocking you over your identity. It's just the failure of all EU member states to agree on opening accession talks, and then they would cite some technical issue. They would cite an issue like, we mentioned this in the previous podcast, when they opened up a gay club in the Albanian part of the city, and they would be attacked routinely by the Albanians, and then the EU would say, listen, this is Gruevski not protecting the homosexuals in the country. So this is the reason why we're blocking them. It's not that we're blocking them over their identity. God forbid that we in the EU would pressure anybody to give up their identity, his, her, their, their identity or whatever. And if you go back to the previous podcast, around minutes 5 to 7, we very easily predicted this was going to happen. We discussed the opening of the club in Bitola at length. Why it was named after Vancho Mikhailov, a very controversial historical figure, huge problem, especially for the left in Macedonia, The culture minister was in tears. She's from Bitola. She would tell anybody who would listen how her grandfather was a huge communist partisan fighter, and now there is a club named after Vancho Mikhailov in her city. So they were all very butthurt, and it was obviously the purpose of opening the club was that it will be attacked. Fortunately, there are no injuries. Nobody is hurt. The group of which opened it, the Bulgarians from Bitola, there is a lot of police involvement here. They have, some of them have solidly extensive links to our intelligence, not to mention obviously now Bulgarian intelligence. So it's, but they played it perfectly. It was played beautifully. Opened the club, gave it a controversial name. We have on the record the president, the prime minister, the foreign minister, who's an Albanian and shouldn't care about these things, and the interior minister, who is supposed to investigate the opening of the club, the torching of the club, the arson. They all strongly condemned the opening of the club. And they referred to the Vancho Mikhailov as a fascist. By extension, they referred to the people who opened the club as Nazi sympathizers, and they're calling it the fascist club in Bitola. So there was a lot of similar comments from the opposition as well, from VMRO, not to mention Levica leader Apasiev. After the torching, he said, "You'll be burned by a major fire," in his rhetorical style. But it's very important to note that, and Bulgarians will note this, no doubt, in Brussels, that the president of the country, the prime minister, the interior minister, the foreign minister referred to a group of Macedonian citizens who set up a club as Nazi sympathizers, and then weeks later, the club they opened was attacked. And now you can't trust the interior minister to investigate this fully, because he said that the people there are Nazis, and you do not negotiate with Nazis, you do not try to reason with Nazis, you kill them. I mean, this is what Antifa stands for, right? This is what. So these were very harsh words from our left, from our government. Obviously, they have a huge problem because a lot of their party split, wouldn't vote for SDSM in the local elections over the issue of Bulgaria. So they had to try to win them over, try to be tough on this issue. After the government allowed the club to be registered, I mean, you have, like we arrested the Serbian bishop, they could find a way to prevent the club from being opened. I mean, they shouldn't even have to come up with a bogus money laundering charge or anything like that. They could have just said, listen, this is a name of a Nazi sympathizer. We cannot allow this to happen. And we're just not allowing you to register the club. But then it would have been a different argument for Bulgaria to go to Brussels and say, listen, they're not allowing a minority group to set up a club. And now they allowed the club to open. The government condemned it, including the interior minister, who is supposed to now protect it from arson. He said they are Nazis, this is a fascist club. And now the club is on fire, and the Bulgarians say, well, obviously we cannot trust you to protect the Bulgarian minority. I mean, it was very plain see-through, but right. The strategy, but Bulgarians played it perfectly, and whoever torched it, was it an inside job, was it a disgruntled person from Bitola, I mean, Bulgaria will just say, listen, the person was obviously inspired by the president, by the prime minister, the interior minister, and the opposition and the foreign minister, all condemning the club in the harshest possible terms. Obviously, hateful rhetoric led to hateful actions, and the Bulgarian foreign minister immediately came to Bitola. It was apparently a pre-planned visit, so the fire was before she came, as she was traveling to Skopje, or just before
suspiciously
she left
timed
for Skopje. Yeah, Of course, before the European Council, it all fits perfectly in the giving a very strong excuse to Bulgaria to block.
Between what you've just said there about Nazis, obviously Russia's war on Ukraine in the name of denazification, between the left calling everybody here on the right, especially Donald Trump, Nazis, I think 2022 is shaping up to be the year of the Nazi.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And did we discuss this? I discussed this at length everywhere. We had the U.S. Embassy's favorite Vemera people, former Vemera people, like Nikola Todorov, Pavle Bogoyevsky, Lyubcha Georgievsky, come out and practically support this figure, Vancho Mikhailov, because he was fighting the pro-Soviet left-wing factions in Macedonia in the 20s, in the 30s. So, and immediately after the club was opened, obviously we're discussing Vancho Mikhailov, but their second point in their interviews they would give around this period was that US good, Russia bad. Ukraine good, Russia bad. So, together, coupled with the church, this is like a package deal we're being offered. So, the right wing in Macedonia. Okay, you get some wins on historical issues, on issues of national identity, on the church, blah, blah, blah. We'll even allow you, throw in several historic figures. We will allow you to honor, after we told you can't honor Alexander or Tsar Samuel or whoever Greece or Bulgaria claims. Okay, we'll give you these guys, but whatever identity you want to have, you can freely express it, but so long as you can tie it up somehow to make it anti-Russia. So if we don't border Russia, we did not have a history of fighting Russia. On the contrary, we have a history of waiting on somebody to liberate us from the Ottomans, and often, Russia looms large in this mythology, and actually it was the liberator for much of the Balkans. So we do not have the Ukrainian. Well, I mean, they're split. They're evenly split, if you ask them. Even now in Ukraine, they're 50-50, and actually I'm surprised it's not more pro-Russian than pro-Ukrainian. They have their columns about Russia and the communist period, and heavy-handed, communism, which was partly Bulgaria's fault, but of course much of it, maybe most of it was Russia's fault. But half of Sofia streets are Russian generals, Russian monuments. The cathedral church is named Alexander Nevsky. Yep. It was briefly renamed Cyril and Methodius when they briefly were at war with Russia. What period was this? The First World War? Over the First World War. They found themselves on opposite sides, but every second street in Sofia has a Russian name. I mean, I'm overdoing it, but a lot of them are.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, this is what the embassy offers us. Okay, you can honor Vancho Mikhailov, but or historic figures from this period of fight between the right wing and the left wing of Vemera. But if you can somehow project the fight against the left wing of Vemera onto Russia, and we give you the church after we stripped all your other sources of sovereignty, because the church was at the time the education ministry, the foreign ministry, the intelligence agency, the justice department, or the dispenser of justice for Macedonians under the Ottomans. It was a crypto state within a state. And then we had all these institutions secularized, and they were working and protecting Macedonia until recently. So education ministry, a secularized education ministry, was teaching children the whole history of Macedonia, not bits and pieces of it. The justice ministry is now subverted to go against the opposition, to go against people who would mention Macedonian sovereignty. The intelligence agencies were working for Macedonia up to the moment when they practically switched and sided with, practically collapsed under American pressure and sided with, first some agents within them, and then wholesale the intelligence now works for the U.S. Embassy. The foreign ministry is now led by 2 Albanians and is negotiating away our national identity. So all these roles which the church played in the past. We had them secularized, we used them extensively. They were all attacked by the US Embassy. They all now work against having a Macedonian state, a Macedonian identity. But we have a church with just a ceremonial role and some historic figures which now the embassy tells us, okay, we will give you these things and you can have fun with them and you can, make celebrations and gestures of identity around them. But if you can project them against Russia, that's when we would allow you to have some national dignity back. And, we have to follow every other order we make, in economics and etc.
Well, I'm going to push back gently on some of that.
Please do.
Setting aside the whole Russia issue, because we could have a whole podcast devoted to that, as we did at the beginning of this. Unlike our friends on the left, unlike our friends in the State Department, unlike progressives around the world, I don't believe that there is a side to history, especially a right side or wrong side or direction to history. It's not that simple. So they always our friends in state and on the left say, right side of history, and we're moving in one direction, onwards and upwards, as Nikola Dimitrov likes to say. I don't believe any of that. I think things come and go, things ebb and flow. To see John Kerry, the former Secretary of State, and others, when talking about the war in Russia, that the 21st, there's no role for a war like this in the 21st century. Thank you, Lurch. Well, maybe not, but it's happening. So it doesn't matter what you believe, 21st century or no 21st century. It just is. That's the reality. Okay, so my point being that just because all of this is happening doesn't mean it has to continue to happen. And ultimately, I still want to stress, Macedonians have it within their power to control their own future, regardless of what the State Department or anybody else, or the Russians or anybody else does. Things were moving in the right direction, I believe, under Nikola Gruevski. And I think one of the problems under the Vomenov government is they got a little bit cocky and did some things they probably shouldn't have, and then that gave state a opportunity to bring them down. That's what happened. It's kind of like Donald Trump would be president of the United States right now if he had done COVID right. I think he really screwed up on that. He got the vaccine going, but he didn't treat it as seriously as he should have. And it was a very close election. But the left took advantage.
Stolen.
Sorry?
Stolen.
Well, I don't know about the election. No, I don't think the election was stolen. Anyway, that's it wasn't stolen.
Okay.
If that was stolen, then to say that 2020 was stolen gives fodder to the left for 2016 to say it was stolen, and so and that's another. We could have a whole discussion on institutions, the death of institutions in the West, especially whether it's Macedonia, the United States, or anywhere else. But anyway, my point being that Donald Trump would be president if he hadn't screwed up there in that last year on certain areas. Nikola Gruevski could have continued if he and the government hadn't screwed up. Point being that we have seen individuals in Macedonia. There are Macedonians who can do what is right for Macedonia and resist resist State Department and the embassy and others. But they gotta have to want to do it, and they gotta have to sacrifice for it. And anyway, that's my my gentle pushback on that. So, we're running a little bit long here. We should probably wrap up.
Okay, well, for a once a month podcast.
Yeah, the rate it's going. Yeah, I know you got major inflation there. Our inflation here is still running, I think, 6.5%, 7%. I was talking to my Estonian friends the other day. It's running 20% in Estonia. In Macedonia, it's what, 10, 11% now?
Officially 9.5, 10, but
yeah, it's bad. I mean, this is not good for any current government. Having to live with inflation like this is not good, and it's going to be, the Democrats are going to get wiped out here in November. So hopefully, let's see, June 18 is the Vomero rally, I believe, or the start of Vomero rallies to hopefully bring down this current government and have new elections sometime soon. So,
yeah, hopefully. No, if we get the veto again in June.
And what's the date on
at the
that
end
then?
of June.
When does the council meet?
It's usually, I think, near the end of the month. I think 20-something.
All right.
Up to the 30th.
Well, maybe looking at the calendar here, June 18 is a Saturday. That's 2 weeks from now. Maybe we'll do a podcast right after that, and then another one after the council.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if the blows of national humiliation slightly maybe moderated
Right.
by this thing with the church and spiking prices, we practically the prices are going up, and then there is a run on things.
Oh, yeah.
So a run on fuel, a run on cooking oil,
But not toilet paper.
No, people figure
Which is
out
what
it's
Americans
not
do. There's a run on toilet paper. Not now, but during COVID. So.
I mean, toilet paper has become very expensive as well, and it's easy to store. I don't know why. I should have invested more in toilet paper, but yeah.
Not Bitcoin,
it's
toilet
cooking
paper.
Oil, fuel, yeah. And apartments are going excessively up, which never happened before. So it probably be even scarier when eventually we reach a breaking point.
The bubble.
Because, usually we own apartments, we don't buy
mortgage.
on mortgage. So the prices were stable and, going up, but, slightly.
Yeah.
And then never going down.
Right.
So we had the 2007 crisis. We didn't, prices didn't drop, 5%, real estate prices.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're going up a lot. So it's not crazy to hear people paying 1,700 per square meter, euros per square meter in Skopje in new apartments, and previously, 1,300 would be tops.
Yeah. Wow.
So a lot of it is driven now by credit, because credit has become very easy, like in the US. And when the bubble bursts there, apparently, we might have for the first time ever a real estate bubble bursting in Skopje, and we'll see how that looks.
So,
it's going to be very shocking.
Yeah, you're telling me that would be the time for me to come and buy because I want to retire in Macedonia.
Yes,
Okay, excellent.
Yes.
All right.
But only if you sell beforehand in Arizona. So
yeah, exactly.
And then it's not a problem to sell. It's a problem where you store the money and in what.
Under my mattress.
That's been yeah. That's the problem, because there can be a run on banks.
Right.
If I remember correctly, the previous crisis, 2007, the Greek crisis.
Yeah.
It's good that everything is going down, but you have to keep the money somewhere. And bonds, government bonds, are usually the way to go.
Buy gold.
Gold, of course, gold is good. Ammunition, toilet paper,
Especially ammunition.
and then exchange your toilet paper for cash, and then for Bitcoin, and fly to Skopje and swoop up on cheap.
Well,
real
that's. I
estate.
mean, it's it's kind of bulky, and so when I fly over there, I'm gonna have to have 3 large suitcases full of toilet paper that I can then exchange. For,
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna have to.
Oh, that's good. Good to end on a
something
laugh. So after some weighty issues. So all right, we'll reconvene in a couple of weeks here and see what's happening. Great talk.
Yeah, of course, buddy. Take care.
Yep, you too. See you.